Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside you find a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and which of the characters from the classic Disney cartoon Recess would you be? At a corner, by the fire, are two people. One of them is saying that he always wished he could be a TJ, but who's he kidding? He's a Gus. And that's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See. We are a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're checking out stuff over at anselmsociety.org, you should check out the project that we have. I've been calling it a new project for a while now, but we're actually in the midst of it. So it's our project for the year 2022. It's on the theme of why we create. We look at different dimensions of us as, embodied human beings in this world and why we are sub-creators in the image of God. So each month we have a different sort of emphasis along that giant theme. And during the month of June, the theme is time. And hopefully you'll be able to see that reflected in the different shows that we have coming out here. There's a lot of fun stuff coming up. That's a hint. Stay tuned. And now for this episode, when I was thinking, okay, what's the right match of co-host to topic? For this topic, there's really only one co-host. Friend of the podcast, special friend of me, my wife, Danielle Mellema. How are you, sweetie?
I'm good, honey. It's good to be here with you.
Oh, good. That is very good to hear. And thank you so much for agreeing to be on the pod.
You're welcome. I'm just thrilled that all the kids fell asleep at the same time so that we could do this.
Yeah, if you had turned me down for the pod, it would be really sad because I'd be recording this by myself on the couch as you walk past.
That would be kind of sad.
Yeah. Before we get going to the main topic, let's pause here for just a bit, and I will take my opportunity to apologize to you once again for my behavior surrounding the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
Oh my goodness, you do owe me an apology. You had some very American things to say about our beloved monarch.
Well, she's not our monarch.
Well, she's the queen, oh my heart.
Okay. Well,
so, there you go.
So, listeners, my mom... Hi, Mom, if you're listening, and I know you are because you're my mom. She loves the royals, and we all love that about her. I do not love the royals, which is weird because I'm kind of an Anglophile. I love rules and I love tradition. So you think, oh, he must be super into the monarchs. But no, the two areas of my life when I'm the most American. One, when Team USA is going for gold in the Olympics, and two, when I'm discussing the monarchy. I can't discuss them without thinking, give me liberty or give me death. You can defend them if you'd like.
No, I'm good. I'm all set. As your brother taught us, that apparently the kids say these days, I'm not going to yuck your yums. If you want to be upset about the monarchy, you can go ahead.
Look at you showing the restraint that I did not show when my mom was having us watch the Jubilee together.
That is true.
Okay.
It was a delight. I mean, not you. You were kind of cranky, but the Jubilee was a delight.
Well, good. I'm glad I didn't yuck your yums.
Yes.
All right, so the topic today, and one of the many reasons why I thought you would be the perfect co-host, is looking at art. And I'm using the term art very broadly. That can apply to TV shows, movies, books, comic strips, any other stuff you can think of that we enjoyed as children. And now we're coming back to it as adults. What stuff holds up well, what stuff doesn't, and how can we take lessons from those examples and apply them to our own children as we try to navigate what we are letting them consume and not consume. So I've been noticing this a lot recently because, listeners, I'm telling you this because Danielle's pretty aware. Our oldest just finished kindergarten. And then we have 3 younger ones beneath that. So they're at an age where they're getting exposed to a lot of different media. They have their different shows that they like. They are old enough to have opinions on what shows they want to watch, what books we read, all of that stuff. And we're trying to navigate it, and it is tricky. So, Mom, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so you had it tougher than I gave you credit for. Okay. And throughout this process, I've noticed I've found shows that I enjoyed as a kid, finding them on like Disney Plus or whatever. We're like, hey, let's try this. And some of them turn out well. More of them do not turn out well. And I'm curious to find out why. What is it about a TV show, movie, book that lets you enjoy it as a kid and come back to it as an adult and enjoy it? And what is the stuff you enjoyed as a kid, but then when you look at it as an adult, you're like, oh gosh, what was I thinking? So let's start with you, Danielle. Let's start by getting some examples of shows, books, TV shows, and stuff that you feel have not aged well. Okay. Like, what did you view as a kid? You come back, oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
Wow, okay. Well, one of the more recent examples that comes to mind, our kids had a sick day several months ago when they had all passed something around, and I had the idea to watch Peter Pan. I loved that movie as a kid. I remember it just feeling very adventurous and fun, and I remembered some of the music of it. I was like, wow, I haven't seen that in years. I can't even tell you how long it's been. Let's watch Peter Pan.
And according to Evangeline Denmark, Peter Pan is Faye. That's an inside joke for people who listen frequently.
There you go. There you go. So anyway, we are watching, and as the movie starts, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this on some of the streaming platforms, but there was a warning as the movie was starting up about racial insensitivity, and I was like, oh, okay. I guess I don't really remember what that would be.
Peter Pan has red hair. Is he Irish, maybe? Is that what's going on?
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye out for that. And it was glaringly obvious, and I can't believe that in the decades since I have last watched it that I had forgotten about some really unjust depictions of Native Americans, which, I think can be an opportunity for conversation with kids. They didn't remove those parts of the movie from Peter Pan, but there was a moment in the middle. I was like, okay, this is going to be more of a conversation than I thought, for just a nice background show that the kids can kind of relax and possibly fall asleep to as they convalesce. So that was a surprise one I had forgotten.
So you are coming out swinging with your examples. First one, racism. Okay. So my example, I guess, has those same elements, but that wasn't the immediate reason I thought of it, because it's bad on other fronts as well. When I was in about first grade or so, I was about the biggest Mighty Morphin Power Rangers nut imaginable. That was at their zenith, and they were awesome.
I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers.
Well, yeah. I guess I was just a cooler kid than you were. But I friggin' love them. I watched it all the time. Me and my brother Jeremy, we had our different favorite Rangers. I liked Jason. Jeremy should have liked Tommy based on his personality, but he liked Billy. It's probably because he came to him so young and he liked the color blue. But anyway, I have so many fond memories of watching Power Rangers. I have Power Rangers gear. In my office, as we speak, I have a Funko of the Red Ranger, Jason, in his special dragon shield, which he took from Tommy in only a couple episodes, and it was awesome. Okay, so finally, Power Rangers on Netflix. My kids are old enough, for like, they can handle it. And I start watching it, and it is terrible. First of all, I found out from a documentary, The Toys That Made Us, also on Netflix, worth a watch, that Power Rangers was a property that was bought by this guy, Saban, and it was originally a show in Japan, but he bought the show rights cheap, then brought all the stuff where it's like the monsters and the guys in the costume, just used it from Japan and then spliced in American teenagers. So it's super cheap to make. And you can tell. But our kids love it, right?
What about the nostalgia factor for you? Does that give it a boost in your eyes, or is it just so bad that you can't?
No, the nostalgia factor is real. It's like when I'm watching the episodes, there's two parts of my head. There's it's like the head and the heart. The head is like, this is terrible. The plots don't make any sense. It's cheaply made. It doesn't, it's, blah, blah, blah. It's blah, blah, blah. It's blah, blah, blah. But then the other part's like, oh, Jason and his dragon shield is so friggin' cool. Oh, Tommy's gonna summon the Dragon Zord from the sea with his power flute. Do 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 do.
Wow.
So I can't quite quit them. And for reasons that anyone who's seen Power Rangers now knows, the racial overtones didn't age particularly well.
Yowza.
Let's leave it there. But yeah, Power Rangers, not great, but our kids love them. So whenever we watch them at grandma's, they come back and have karate class with each other, which basically means they take turns kicking each other.
Yes.
Which also isn't great.
Yes. You got to consider the fruit of it a little bit. And I mean, it's not even like they could just pass it off as doing karate, because when they're doing it, they'll shout karate, karate as they're like doing moves. And that I would just think is a general interest in karate. They could have gotten that anywhere, but then they'll shout Power Rangers, karate. And you're like, oh my gosh. Well, you gave yourselves away, kids. You gave yourselves away.
Can I tell a story?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so I have this college buddy. He'll remain nameless. But when he was very little, he was like 4 or 5, he was outside with his parents who were down like in the basement below, and his little brother, who was like 2, was at the top of the basement stairs looking down at his parents as they were working. So my buddy, again, is 4 or 5, decides that it would be really funny to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle kick his little brother down the stairs. So he does. And the brother goes tumbling all the way down the stairs, lands in like a heap on the floor. The parents look up at my buddy, who is, incredibly guilty. But the thing is, he may have gotten away with it. Or at least not had turtles taken away. But as he was turtle kicking his brother, he yelled, "Cowabunga."
Ooh, that's the death knell right there.
Michelangelo's catchphrase. Let that be a lesson, all you kids. If you're going to kick your brother down a flight of stairs, don't give the catchphrase of the superhero you're pretending to be. It's a giveaway. But anyway, the turtles will appear later on this list, but not under my not aged well. That's a teaser. So how about any other ones that for you that you just feel aren't well made, didn't hold up when you rewatch them as an adult?
Well, I just think about the movies or shows that we watch that, this could even apply to books, where it's kind of labeled as like a movie for our times. Like the other day, for the first time in I don't know how long, the movie Fern Gully came into my head. Did you guys ever watch Fern Gully?
I started watching Fern Gully as a small child. I was a very sensitive boy, easily frightened, easily upset. And when I saw those big machines coming toward the trees, I just lost it and I couldn't finish the movie.
Yes. So I think movies like that.
Their propaganda friggin' worked.
Yes. Okay. So art like that, that's like a little bit on the nose about the message it's trying to share. That to me tends not to age well, because it's usually based on kind of the cause du jour and doesn't always translate. Inevitably just makes for like a really bad movie with kind of ridiculous characters and not much of a plot. It's like point made, but at what cost?
Wait, tell me this, since I never saw the ending. Did all the fairies who live in the trees survive, or were they chopped down?
You'll just have to watch the movie.
I'm not going to, because it'll emotionally traumatize me.
It's still too much.
They survived, he told himself.
I don't want to give any spoilers.
Okay.
And then also, as an adult, we've talked a lot about movies and shows, but there's a book series that I loved as a kid. It's probably some of the first chapter books I ever read by myself. The Boxcar Children.
Yeah!
The Boxcar Children. And as a kid, it all just sounded very adventurous. Like, yeah, these kids, they're doing it on their own, living in this boxcar. And you know what? They're just fine. And then as an adult, as I think about the Boxcar Children, I'm like, wait a second. How did this happen? How did were there no teachers, their grandfather that they later meet? Like, how did they not know about these kids living in a boxcar? This is a true crisis. And also, how are they just kind of okay with it once they finally met people to care for them? And they were like, yeah, it was all right, our boxcar life, no hard feelings.
So you're concerned about the logic of the Boxcar Children.
I really am. Like, to me, that's just a giant hole in this.
Well, sweetie, let me preface this by saying that I love you very much before I correct you on your wrongness here.
Oh, my.
So I may have mentioned this to you. I was homeschooled for a while.
I'm aware.
Listeners, if I haven't said that, you could probably tell because of everything about me. But yes, I was homeschooled. And for a while, before we'd begin our day of homeschooling, my mother, as any good homeschool parent would, read us books. This included Boxcar Children, the first one, and many, many, many of the subsequent ones. You may or may not be surprised to learn that, according to Wikipedia, there are now over 160 titles in the Boxcar Children series.
Stop.
The first book, written by Gertrude Chandler Warner, was written in 1924. They are still going strong.
I do not know what to say
to
to
that. So here's a couple things that I have to say in response. One, I think the logic holds up quite well.
Oh, tell me more.
The children's parents, remember this in the 20s, the roaring 20s. So for all we know, they're, addicted to the booze or the opium or whatever they're into back then.
Word.
So the parents both die, and leaving the 4 children orphaned. And the parents apparently had a falling out with the grandfather, such that they badmouthed the grandfather and led the Boxcar Children to believe he was an unkind, just mean person. So that's why they ran away to a boxcar, which in the maybe that was more of a thing. I don't know. They seemed to have a good life, though. Jesse would cook the meals. They had the pond where they could swim and bathe. They could catch fish. Seemed very bucolic. Then finally the grandfather finds them and brings them to his big house, and he's nice and it's great. But then, over the next 159 titles pretty much, they did a hard pivot to being this sort of coming-of-age adventure story about 4 children trying to make it on their own, to being a series of detective mysteries. So each one, they'd solve a mystery. They'd go somewhere with their rich grandfather, a mystery would pop up, and they would solve it together. And each book would have a paragraph. It's like copy and paste. Like, we used to live alone in a boxcar, but then blah, 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 blah. And it was great.
They just seem very cool with it to me. There's no enduring
trauma. It was
always they're fine.
Oh, they're fine. They're living their best lives.
We lost both our parents. We lived in an actual boxcar, but we're okay though.
Now they travel the world solving mysteries.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you don't find that realistic?
Oh, I'm buying it for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Whether the Melamed children will be reading the Boxcar Children, I suppose, remains to be seen.
Well, if they go to if they go to Grandma Sue's house, then they will be.
Definitely will.
All right. So my next one, maybe this says more about me than it does about the medium. Do you remember the TV show Doug?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
I was a big fan of Doug growing up. Well, I was a fan of Doug, especially late elementary school, middle school. Partly because all my friends said I reminded them of Doug.
Oh my.
I'll let you try to figure out why, and if this alters the way you view me in any way, don't tell me. That was part of it, but I have no desire to view it as an adult. And I will tell you why.
I haven't thought about him forever.
Even at the time, I thought Doug was a little preachy. They'd always have this lesson where Doug would give his voiceovers.
A movie with a message.
The dangers of mail-in, prize contests. How it's inappropriate.
On a very special episode.
There was a very special episode where Patty Mayonnaise becomes anorexic.
Oh my goodness, I don't remember that.
Well, she gets an eating disorder, and it's a thing. And it was one of those things where, for more information about eating disorders, contact them.
Wow.
And every episode would have this solid lesson.
Doug.
And even as a 7th grader, I'm like, this is too preachy. I feel uncomfortable. I am more comfortable with irony and self-referential humor. So like I said, maybe that says more about me than about Doug. But sorry, Doug, I don't want to hear what you have to say about mail-in prizes.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Wow. I've not thought about Doug in a long time.
Let me say something.
Yeah, there you have it.
Although I do kind of want to watch it now that I'm talking about it. Anyway, maybe each of us do one more, then we'll get to the good ones.
One more. I don't have one more.
You don't have one? You can only, wow.
I mean, come on, there's lots I could think of. I mean, gosh,
okay. I'm gonna think of one for you here.
No, do you want to know? Actually,
the Disney Channel movies.
Well, I did want to I have a lot of Disney-related examples. I think that's very telling about my childhood.
Here's the thing.
The Disney Channel
Danielle
movies.
Grew up obviously more wealthy than I did.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't have cable. Danielle did. So she was able to watch all these Disney Channel movies. Are you saying those all hold up well?
No, I would never say that. Although there is this one movie a Disney Channel movie.
Brink!
Called, oh, no, not Brink. That's with an exclamation point, by the way. No, it's called Smart House.
Okay.
And, you know, this family, they just lost their mother. A parent has always died. That is an important element in any Disney or Disney Channel movie. Their mothers died.
A middle grade
They're
hero
very
cannot
sad.
have two
that's
together
a rule.
parents.
That's a
it's
rule.
a rule.
That's a rule. And so they win this contest to move into this smart house that's sort of like, I don't know, internet connected and has basically
World Wide Web.
an Alexa living in it. And it's all nice at first until it isn't. And she sort of becomes humanoid and things get bad. But then they get better because it's Disney Channel, so nothing can end truly badly. Anyway, it makes me laugh because it's like, oh, that's for sure a thing. Like, people have smart homes now, and it's not that big a deal. Although the one feature it had that I wish we could have is you could give a command to, like, clean up a mess, and it would just sort of like, the carpet would just sort of like, it would sink into the carpet, and it was just gone. Everything was clean. I'm like, ooh, tell me more about that. Though we do have a dog, and she does a pretty good job of licking up what she can.
So I'm getting the drift here. Again, I was too poor to watch Disney Channel original movies. But for you, more privileged.
Oh, my.
Do you look back on all of these movies fondly? Like, do you think they would hold up well, or do you view them as like products of their time / you'd probably be embarrassed to go back and watch them?
Well, I mean, that's different questions. Will I ever bother to show a Disney Channel original movie or like a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie? Will I ever show that to our kids? No. It served its purpose at the time. Would I watch it with like my sister or like girlfriends who also grew up on the movie? Just for fun, just for like a nice nostalgic walk down memory lane? Absolutely, I would. But since the question at hand on this episode is whether it's something we would share with our kids, I mean, I say definitely not.
Okay, so it sounds like they are your Power Rangers.
Yeah.
You enjoy them, but it's for the nostalgia, it's for the memories,
right.
It's for like the in-jokes you can tell with other people who get it. It's not for any like merits that they have.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. By the way, listeners, I've been trying to get Danielle and her sister to start a podcast where they just go through all the Disney Channel movies one by one. Stay tuned for the Brink!
Oh, God.
Did I put the exclamation point there?
I felt it.
Good.
I felt it. They're soul skaters.
So,
wow, where is this coming from in my brain? Yikes.
There's something there. But my final one for things that did not age well, and this is something I really, really loved when I was a kid. I used to love the comic strip Garfield.
Okay.
So I would get books of Garfield comics through them. I would laugh hysterically. I developed my own comic strip as a boy based off of Garfield.
Are you the cutest? I love that.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. But I just really loved them when I was a kid. Reading back on them, they're clearly designed for young children and only young children. Like, so many of the gags are based off of, just recurring things that we all know. Mondays. Lasagna. That Odie. John is boring. All this stuff. There's really nothing beneath the absolute surface stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of stuff where it's like, if you're 8 and you're just working on it, cool, but there's nothing beneath the surface there. Especially if you compare it to something like Calvin and Hobbes, which I also loved as a kid, in which I still love today.
We're already reading that to our kids.
Oh, the kids are already reading through it. And I would not seriously consider sharing Garfield with them because, again, it's just not a whole lot there. But let's transition there because that's a good bridge from Garfield bad to Calvin and Hobbes good. And I think there are a lot of reasons Calvin and Hobbes is good. First of all, there's a sort of a broader scope of humor. Like, it's not just the simple, he likes lasagna, he hates Mondays. Boom, play that joke a million times. It's a wide range of things. There's the transmogrifier, there's relationship with Hobbes, there's his relationship at the classroom, there's Spaceman Spiff, there's Stupendous Man, there's Rosalind, all this multidimensional things. Calvin and Hobbes are both actually pretty complicated characters. Mm-hmm. They're capable of real emotions. Some strips are actually pretty poignant, and you can tell that Bill Watterson May he rest in peace, even though he's not dead, but he's not doing anything, so may his work rest in peace. You can tell he tries to make his comic form art. Like, he really cares about that, and you can see it, especially in his later strips, because strip kept getting better as it kept going. So I just think it is very worthwhile. I'm guessing you would agree with me on Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Any virtues of Calvin and Hobbes that I failed to praise?
Oh, man. I just enjoy it so much. And I do feel like a lot of the humor of it has held up over time. It wasn't really like linked to like current events or cultural trends of the, 80s and 90s. Like, it still holds up all these years later, because I feel like a lot of the humor is kind of rooted in like the tension that you feel between like Calvin's imaginative world and his reality. And it's just funny. It's
I like
so
how his
enjoyable.
imagination, like the artwork for his imagination, is more realistic than like the real stuff.
Yeah, it has a lot more dimension to it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so fun. And our boys really do love it, and they laugh. And they're young. They're really young, and they just enjoy it so much. It's fun. It's super fun.
All right, so as we cross over the bridge officially, now let's get into the good stuff. We got the bad stuff out of the way. Now let's get the stuff where we come back to it and we actually find, surprise, surprise, we enjoy it. What are some that you've had that experience with?
As like funny as some of our negative examples are, I have found overall that there's a lot more things from my childhood that actually have translated really well, and that I'm almost having to restrain myself from showing it to our kids like too early before they're really able to like fully enjoy it. Because I'm just so enthusiastic about sharing those things with them. But even a few of those things I've already been able to share, like the Eric Carle books. I really loved those as a kid. And those are all really appropriate for all four of our kids' ages. That's like The Hungry Caterpillar, Brown Bear, or this time of year I really love to show them the Firefly book.
The Very Lonely Firefly.
The Very Lonely Firefly. It lights up at the end. We don't have any here in Colorado. Where I grew up in Missouri, there are tons about this time of year. And so it's really fun to show them that one. They have already seen Beauty and the Beast, which is my favorite childhood movie. And sometimes your favorite childhood movie, you grow up and realize like, oh, this is so awful. I think I like it more as an adult than I did as a kid. The animation, the music, the concept, the slow jam version of every song at the credits.
Was it like Seal and Celine Dion or something?
It was definitely Celine Dion.
Sail is all that's time.
Oh, wow. That is impassioned. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's just so good. Everything about it is so good. And the kids really enjoy it.
I remember, because growing up, my Disney movies that I had basically on repeat were Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, and Aladdin. And I loved them all. When I was a kid, I liked Beauty and the Beast primarily because I thought Lumiere was funny. And Jeremy, my younger brother, thought Cogsworth was funny. So then we pretend to be them as we watched, and that was cool. Then I remember when I was really sick, when I was like 16 or 17. I was like, I don't know what else to do. I'll watch an old movie. So I watched Beauty and the Beast, and I started watching. I was like, wait a sec, this is actually good. Like, wait, what? And I felt that way ever since. Yeah,
it is excellent. I have always really enjoyed that movie, and it's been fun to share that with the kids.
Gaston is maybe my favorite Disney villain, just because his motivation is interesting. He's relatable in a different way from most Disney villains, and he's handsome and cool. Like, I like that they made the villain handsome and cool.
I would agree with you completely on that. It's just it just hits a lot of really good beats that is very comforting from Disney movies, but I think goes beyond what a lot of the other more princess Disney movies would. It's just really excellent. We this past winter read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to our kids for the first time.
Well, Danielle, does that really count as an example? This is an Anselm podcast. That is a given.
No one's going to argue with it. No one's going to argue with it. Like, obviously, that has aged well over time. Though I will say we are slightly divided on the merits of the movie that came out.
We're not slightly divided. If you
in 06-ish.
First one came out in 06.
Okay. Yes. We're a little divided on the merits. We did show it to our kids after reading the
Prince
book.
Caspian is terrible.
Well, I can't. I mean, I agree with you on that one. I'm talking specifically about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Well, that one's not good either.
I think we are split on the merits of that movie. But that was a really special experience for us. We have not showed this or read it to the kids yet, but Anne of Green Gables, I think, is one that not only has the book really stood the test of time, which is interesting because it's over 100 years old now, if I'm remembering correct. But I feel like it still depicts like childhood in such a relatable way, even as that has changed so much over time. Oh man, I'm excited to read that to them. I'm also excited. My first exposure to those stories actually was the movie version that came out in the 80s. And we used to watch it. We didn't have it at our house, but it was at Grandma's house. And even still, sometimes when I visit my grandma, we will watch that movie. And that will be really fun to show them someday. I feel like it's very true to the spirit of the books, even if like some of the finer plot points get moved around. That one is one to me that even though like I think maybe the video quality doesn't necessarily hold up, it's so endearing, and oh man, that's a fun one.
So the reason I ask you this is because I feel secure in myself as a human being and a man. I assume you were in love with Gilbert as a girl.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, he's no Matt Mellema, but...
That's kind of you to say, but let's camp here for a little, because I find this phenomenon fascinating. I read an article about this once where how this was like a seminal moment in like a girl's journey from girlhood through adolescence is the rite of passage of falling in love with Gilbert. What is the appeal of Gilbert?
Oh my, the appeal of Gilbert. I think it's kind of that classic boyish charm. I don't know. It's hard to describe. Even though I feel like he's sort of Anne's nemesis, not just because he picks on her, but because like she's sort of like the worst version of herself around him consistently. He still just insists on being her friend. I think there's something in those like really awkward in-between years where you just need some people who are going to be like, you are super weird and I don't get you all the time, but I'm sticking with you. And I think that people of that age can just appreciate that.
So here's my impression. I know everyone really wants to hear why my theories on why Gilbert's attractive. I think he is a fundamentally good boy, both just enough danger mixed in. It's like a little pinch of danger to make it exciting. Because he's very smart. It's clear he's very hardworking. He helps his dad around the farm. He's going to be a doctor someday. He gets great grades. But he plays pranks.
Kind of
He's not afraid to tease Anne in like a cool way that makes her mad, but, you know, in like a hot way.
You're so strange.
This is it, right?
I could see that reasoning for some. I would not necessarily say that that was my reason.
Were you first attracted to me because of my danger?
Oh, man. Definitely. That was the first thought. That and your musical prowess as well.
I made fun of your hair color and you broke a slate over my head. That was our meet cute. All right, that is a good list. That's a very good list.
Anything you would add?
Well, just really briefly to the book Anne of Green Gables. I think I mentioned this on this podcast before, but we were doing an interview with Ashley Coles, friend of Anselm, and we were talking about the Netflix series Anne with an E, which me and Ashley both thought was awful. We were comparing it to how great the books were. And as part of that, I read through the books, or I started reading through them for the first time, and I was very familiar with the 80s movie, because my mom insisted that me and my brothers watch it to become sensitive.
Woman. She's a very wise woman.
But I never actually read the books. So I was starting reading them, and like you said, they're very old, published in 1908. but they hold up really well, and it's actually really funny.
Oh, it's so funny. I remember the first time I read the books, I was an adult at the time and thought, I've watched the movie, I don't even know how many times. I've never read the book. That feels crazy to me. I will read it. And I have a hard time listing a book that has made me laugh out loud more than that book. I think maybe even as an adult, you're a little more jaded than you are as a child, maybe. Not that I would define either of us that way. But you've seen some stuff, I guess. And just her outlook on the world, it's so positive and hopeful and lovely that it just makes you laugh out loud sometimes at like the beauty she attributes to what we would think as like extremely mundane. It's so delightful. I do love that book. I think in a sort of similar way, Mr. Rogers kind of accomplishes
He's
that.
on my list, sweetie. He's on my good list.
He's on my list too. I remember when Sam, our oldest, he was maybe 2 when they had, I want to say it was like the 40th, 50th. I forget.
It was like some
anniversary year for Mr. Rogers. And so they had some episodes of it showing more often on PBS. I was like, this could be great. I'll just show it to him. I remember loving the show. But he was also 2. I was a little concerned he maybe wouldn't hang with it. He was captivated. And I'm telling you, if you want to talk about low budget stuff, Mr. Rogers was low budget stuff. Some of those puppets, as an adult, I'm like, yikes, we could have tried harder, perhaps. But there's just so much heart, and there's such a kind view into everyday things that for us as adults might seem like small things, but for kids are very big things or new things, which makes them inherently a little bit scary. And I just appreciate it so much. The documentary came out around that same time, again, because it was an anniversary year. And I tell you, I am a crier.
You were openly weeping. Openly weeping.
At the end of a documentary, of all things, in a long time. I mean, it was just excellent. And it's very meaningful. And it's been fun to share that with our kids.
Yeah. So on the Mr. Rogers front, I totally agree. And one of the things a couple things stuck out to me just like rewatching it as an adult with our 2-year-old. One, Mr. Rogers is not afraid to discuss the big topics with the kids. The first episode we saw, the theme was death. Like literally it was about death. And that's he's explaining that to children. And along those lines, one of the things I admire about Mr. Rogers is he never talks down to his audience. He never disrespects his audience. You can tell he holds the young children's audience in very, very high regard. And that seems to be the core idea that energizes the whole thing. And I just really appreciate that. And it makes it age very well. Mm-hmm. Something related to that I've also started showing the kids every now and then is Reading Rainbow. Did you watch Reading Rainbow growing up?
Some, yes. We watched it, I remember when they would cart in the TV on the big tall cart at school. Oh. Sometimes it was to get to watch a Reading Rainbow. So
well, I think
it was like sort of a very special thing.
That's one of those things where in some ways, it's very much, it's super 90s or super 80s. But in other ways, I think it ages really well because so much of it is presenting the books, presenting the different topics. LeVar Burton is an absolutely fantastic host. And I want to go on record as saying I was furious that he did not get the hosting role of Jeopardy. I think I speak for all people of my generation. But along those lines, I was just thinking the impact that especially Mr. Rogers and LeVar Burton had on the nation. Because when LeVar Burton was getting floated out for something, again, it was like the hosting job of Jeopardy. Mm-hmm. But people were coming out of the woodwork like, oh my gosh, I freaking love LeVar Burton. Or when Mr. Rogers would speak out on an important topic, like after 9/11, he gave like a talk that was very meaningful to a lot of people. It's like, are there 2 people in America at that point who had more moral authority than Mr. Rogers and LeVar Burton? Like that impact that they had on people when we're little, it's still around. I hold LeVar Burton in very high esteem. I would vote for him for whatever political office right now. I know nothing about his political views, but I'd vote for him. I'd make Mr. Rogers our, unitary executive king/emperor.
Excellent.
It's the effects of a good children's story. So, changing gears ever so slightly. A show that I really enjoyed as a kid that I think holds up completely. Like 5 out of 5, no notes. Recess.
Man, I have a hard time relating to that one. I just did not watch Recess. Tell me what you love about it. Tell me why you think our kids should watch it.
Okay, so for listeners who are not of me and Danielle's generation, Recess aired in late 90s. It's a Disney product, so most of it's on Disney Plus if you want to check it out. But it takes place at this elementary school between this group of friends who are all fourth graders, and they just have adventures during recess. And I loved it because I thought it just really captured what it was like to be a kid. So I think that attitude just animates all of it, the relationships that kids have with each other, and also it's genuinely funny. It has messages, but it's not all preachy like Doug. And I just think it super holds up.
Interesting. I'd be willing to give it a try. I mean, truly, I'm not rejecting it.
Listeners, you should know that when Danielle says interesting in that tone, she means but she's too nice to say it.
No, interesting in this case. Sometimes it means that. Interesting in this case means I didn't really watch a lot of Recess, so I'm fascinated to hear your perspective on it. It's just not something that caught my imagination in the same way.
It's not just about the hijinks. It has the hijinks. But I think what it does is it captures some essence of childhood.
Okay.
Like the social relationships among groups of friends that groups of friends have between others. And
is that something you recognize now as an adult, or is that even something that you had a sense of as a kid?
I had a sense of it as a kid. And this was one of the things, being homeschooled and watching it, thinking, ooh, that's
true.
What it's like in the broader world. Oh. Intriguing. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, no, these are just sort of generalized things kids feel, regardless of the school system they're in. But I think their capturing of childhood really holds up well. And I remember, my parents really liked that show, too.
Ooh, okay.
My parents would try to hide the shows, they wouldn't openly admit that they hated the shows that me and my brothers liked watching. Mm-hmm. Now they admit that they hate some of the shows. But they have consistently loved Recess, and they still love it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm listening.
And this next one, I'm sorry and yet not sorry.
Oh
because I know you're going to dispagree with me, but I just think it's because you're wrong.
Oh my goodness. Let's hear it.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants, absorbent and yellow and porous is he.
Oh man.
I think SpongeBob, especially the early seasons.
Is there a way we can do the poll now among our listeners?
Like seasons 1 through 3, absolutely hilarious, absolute masterpieces. They're great. You don't agree?
Oh man.
I know for a fact your sister and your dad agree with me.
Yes. Dad and my sister loved SpongeBob. My dad genuinely enjoyed it so much. Mom and I never understood it, which is funny because now that I think about it, there are a lot of shows that are widely loved and that maybe even I like now that Mom and I actually saw together to start and we didn't get it. I think as a pairing, we kind of weird about shows. Mom and I did not like SpongeBob. We also, interestingly, when we first saw Napoleon Dynamite, there's another blast from the past. Mom and I watched it together, just the two of us. I don't know why. We didn't get it. And then A Christmas Story, I watched for the first time as an adult, or maybe I was in college, with just my mom. And we didn't get it. And it wasn't until we watched it also with Dad and my sister that it started to become funny. So I wonder in some of this if it's a matter of a combo of people you experience it with that helps you open your eyes to its merits sometimes. But SpongeBob is just a no thank you, sir.
So I think we've established that the problem is with you. So that's good to just get on the ground.
It could be fair.
But I think SpongeBob holds up well because you can tell they're actually, the animators, the creators, are actually trying to create art. They're not just doing another silly kid show. The animation was really pushing the boundaries. I saw this video where talking about the creation of SpongeBob the Musical, which was a hit on Broadway. And they're talking about going back to the history of SpongeBob and how he was the creator was like a really big admirer of like really obscure indie like animation from like the early days of animation, how this translated in there. There's a reason why SpongeBob is one of the greatest sources of GIFs on the internet. That's because the animation is just so expressive. It's so boundary pushing with capturing emotions. It's so creatively free. The relationships between the characters are just hilarious and they hold up really well. Again, I'm talking especially about the early seasons when they had the original showrunner. Masterpieces. Okay, Danielle's giving me that look, so I'm gonna move on.
If I have a rebuttal. I don't have the energy to rebut
So we've gone through some examples of shows that did not age well and shows that did age well. So now I want to transition to the practical. Taking this raw data, can we synthesize this into some generalized lessons that me and you can use in the way that we try to direct the art that we expose our children to? What are some lessons that you've taken from this exercise?
You know, when I was evaluating some of the things on both my lists, my first thought was to look for kind of like common themes between the art. But I don't know that that necessarily came through in the way that I thought it would. It's not so much about the themes. I think there's tons of examples of any theme that have been done really well and that have been done really poorly. So I think a super common theme for children's literature, movies, shows, etc., is teamwork. Come on, don't we all want to teach our kids?
One superhero robot dinosaur is powerful on his own, but as a team of super robot dinosaurs, they're unstoppable.
So like my boys, our 3 boys, are very into things that go. That includes construction trucks. And so they love the Good Night construction site book series, which is very cute as far as construction truck related.
By the way, cute is one of my red flag words when people are describing children's artwork.
And
what cute means is it's bad, but we're pretending it's not bad because it's directed at kids.
No, you better quit. They really like those.
I'm stepping off my soapbox, honey.
They really like those. And I feel like it at least has some merit in what it does for their imagination. So it's not bad as far as a book about trucks goes. But I mean, the themes are a little more obvious. Like literally one of the books ends, each one stronger than they seemed. Can you finish it?
Because they're working as a team.
We've read that a few times. So I mean, like teamwork is like the point of this book. But alternatively, I feel like in that picture book category, there are a ton of really excellent books that also all touch on this theme in some way, but it's subtly and with much more depth, much more purpose. And the ultimate point of those books is never like teamwork, hooray, but it's something about like the deep goodness that there is beyond that. So just a few that come to mind are like The Ox Cart Man by Donald Hall, illustrations by the Barbara Cooney of Miss Rumphius fame, which we love. Like every person in the family has a role in keeping with the particular season to care for their family, to honor their dependence on the land and their oneness with creation. But like teamwork is not like the theme of the book, but it's really not missable. Like my kids have even commented on like the different jobs, the different family members. I think that's so interesting. So it's not a book about teamwork, but it's certainly present in the book, but it's not teamwork for teamwork's sake. Mm-hmm. There's a greater purpose to that. Our kids also really love Home in the Woods. I really love Home in the Woods by Eliza Wheeler. That is another one that gets you crying. Oh man, if you want to see me cry, let's read Home in the Woods together. The illustrations are so beautiful. It's an author-illustrator, Eliza Wheeler. She's wonderful. But this family has to overcome, it's a true story, a fictionalized version of a true story from the author's grandmother. And they have to overcome losing their father and their home at the height of the Great Depression. And so we see them, working together to remake their home and their family. But aside from just the practical, everyone also has a role to play in sort of the imaginative life of their family. But it's not the point of the book. Like with teamwork, you can overcome anything, but that somehow together they're all contributing to the healing of their family and to the hope that they have after experiencing this loss. So it's not overt, but it's very beautiful. It's something pointing to something beyond it. And we read in the spring, we'd like to read Rain School by James Rumford. That's my 3-year-old's favorite. He requested it just today. It's set in Central Africa. The children and the teacher work together to literally rebuild their school every year at the beginning of the school year, because the rainy season washes the school away at the end of each school year. And so the rebuilding of the school not only makes it possible for the kids to learn, it's actually a part of their education and formation to rebuild the school together, but it also is allowing their community to thrive. So there's always something kind of beyond a theme like that. Like when we just try to be really on the nose and preachy, like you talked about with Doug about the theme, sometimes it doesn't translate as powerfully as something that's integrated into like something that's deeply true and good, what I would maybe describe as like values of like the kingdom of God. I feel like that can kind of communicate some of those themes in a more effective way. And it doesn't always have to be like really deep and emotional. Like it doesn't have to be like they lost their father and it was the Great Depression. Like it doesn't always have to be like that. Like
they lived in a friggin' boxcar.
Like I even think about like the Richard Scarry Busy Town books.
I love
like,
Busy Town.
Certainly teamwork is a major theme in that, but like they're quirky and they are silly and funny, and the illustrations are almost over the top in the amount of detail that they have in it. But it also is communicating a truth that like we choose to work together because we belong to one another. And I think that's a much more powerful, more rooted way to communicate something like teamwork than something that literally ends the book by saying, each one's stronger than they seem because they're working as a team. Anyway, I think it doesn't always have to be serious in the way it's presented, but I'm always very watchful for things that are weaving in these things in a more winsome, story-based way than something quite so overt.
That makes sense. To me, it seems the difference between a theme that is, like you said, woven into the fabric of the story versus a theme that's sort of slapped on at the end. I think teamwork is a perfect example of that, because if you have just a show that's geared to grab the attention of an 8-year-old, well, obviously you just need a team of heroes fighting some monster. Right. Bright colors, shiny lights, laser weapons, boom, you got it. And then you can almost see like the note from corporates, like you need a lesson at the end. It's like, teamwork, slap, and then it's fine. Like Power Rangers, teamwork. Turtles, teamwork.
Yep.
Thundercats, teamwork. You didn't watch Thundercats.
Mary Kate and Ashley, teamwork.
Come
on.
So that's sort of the bad way, but the good way, again, same theme, teamwork. But if you take like, this is a story that sort of explores an aspect of it, and that's sort of woven into the story itself, then it can be really effective. Like teaching kids about teamwork, or if you want to make it a little bit, broaden it out a little bit more, the value of community is potentially a really important thing. So it's not looking at almost some lessons being more important than others. There's a difference between slapping on a lesson and weaving the lesson into the story.
Or starting with the lesson and moving backwards, which I feel like is always just painfully obvious. Like, we want to write a book about, the importance of kindness. What story could I write about kindness? Like, oh man, this is kind of painful. But I think there's ways to develop characters in such a way that's communicated in a way that has more power to translate into a more permanent part of a child's imagination, perhaps, like in a more formative way than just very obvious lessons.
Yeah, so that's a good first lesson for us to derive. Yeah. Lesson number 2, I'll go with this one, and it's just sort of a principle where, in general, it's extremely easy to grab the attention of young children. Like, you just need a few elements, you throw them out there, and you can get a kid's attention. Let's go with me when I was, 6 years old, and Power Rangers. We've joked about this before, but it's like Power Rangers, you can almost picture the executives in a meeting just like, okay, What are things that 6-year-old boys like? Dinosaurs, gotcha. Giant robots, okay. Monsters, yes. Cool teenagers, yes. Karate, yes. That's the show. Go figure it out. And that's basically what it was. And me as a 6-year-old was like, well, these cool teenagers have dino powers. They're in giant robots fighting monsters and they do karate. What? That's easy to do. Another example, it's a show my kids super love. And actually, one of the animators who helped with the original pitch was actually a friend of the show.
Oh.
He was not the biggest fan of this show. He went off to go do his own artwork, but Dino Trucks.
Dino Trucks. That's a grandma's house show.
Yes, it is. We do not watch it here. But again, it is about construction trucks that are in the shape of dinosaurs. They don't explain how this world came to be. That's just what it is. And again, you almost feel like it's reverse engineered to grab the attention of kids in like the cheapest way possible. What do kids like? Dinosaurs and trucks. Boom. There's your show.
Right, which I think is interesting to contrast with the approach that we talked about with like LeVar Burton and Mr. Rogers, who really have a deep respect for children and crafted their shows around that respect, that belief that they could really grasp difficult concepts, and not only grasp it, but that some of them were like currently experiencing these things and treating them with the dignity that they deserve. It makes me think of like even Jesus's words, like, let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Like, there really is this dynamic where like children are really able to be a part of that greater story in ways that I think because of their youth, because of their, I don't know, innocence, we don't always give them credit for. But I think forming their appetites in that direction is really important. Not that every single thing has to be like high art, like direct lines to like what is, you know, valuable in the kingdom of God. It's okay to have some books that are just fun for fun's sake sometimes, because you're also trying to form their like interest in reading and art, and sometimes that means letting them lead the way with what is interesting to them at the time. I think we've been kind of having to feel out that combination, but there's a very real sense in which like they are part of the kingdom. The story that we desire them to get caught up in is theirs, and they are able to grasp it. I think that's important to remember as we determine what shows, books, movies to introduce them to. So they are capable of grasping some of those higher themes.
That was the next sort of lesson I had, which is sort of a counterbalance to some of the stuff we were saying, because I think it's very easy to accidentally get this attitude like, the only art my children will consume is the highest of art. And of course, this is an Anselm Society podcast. Of course, we try to expose our kids to good books, good movies, good everything. But I think there is something to be said for letting your kid figure out something that they just really super love and letting them run with it.
Right.
And not necessarily like, well, we need to make sure that all that stuff. It's just like, no, you just love this. This really fires up your imagination, so go with it. I'm thinking about Andrew Peterson gave a talk at an Anselm conference a while back about how when he was growing up, he read really, really awful like fantasy stories with all these like sort of Lord of the Rings knockoff dwarves and elves and stuff. And he was like, they're objectively terrible, but they did kind of fire up his imagination. He was able to use that later on. Some of those aspects of those books became incorporated into the Wing Feather books, and you can use it for better things.
Absolutely.
Like, to be honest, the books I'm writing now, if I'm being totally honest, I can see some Power Rangers influence in them. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Because for all of the many poor qualities we discussed earlier, Power Rangers really fired up my imagination when I was a kid. Or with our second oldest, who's 4, just about to turn 5, he loves Godzilla so much. Like, we've just been sailing through all the old Godzilla movies from the 60s and 70s.
His 5th birthday party theme is Godzilla. That was determined maybe 6 months ago.
Every day he produces at least a dozen original works of Godzilla art. And he talks about Godzilla, and which Godzilla, like, he just loves it. Now, some Godzilla movies are genuinely good. The original Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, was very interesting, all that. But a lot of them, especially from the 60s and 70s, are very cheesy. They're not exactly great cinema. But I do think there's value in letting him watch them because it just fires up his imagination so much. And I like watching him engage with something that he just loves.
Yeah, it is fun. And it's really exciting. And I think we have to find the balance of, like, for us, sometimes we kind of wonder, like, okay, well, what is the fruit that we're seeing of this? And I think sometimes that kind of helps us to evaluate it. I think we're also trying to remember that, like, okay, if our kids, like, if they belong to Christ, which they do, then there is going to be a ongoing process of sanctification in their lives, which is going to include their minds, their imagination. So even the inputs that we may not think are, quite as, good, true, and beautiful as we would hope, like, even, like Andrew Peterson talked about, even the kind of silly fantasy novels that aren't that good, like, there's great potential even for those works in an imagination that is continually moving further up and further in. And so I think there doesn't have to be, like, a fear of not giving the very best of every single thing, because their appetites are being formed in other ways. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
That does make sense. Yeah, so let's move on now to the last section, and that is examples that we've seen, because we're actively trying to find, stuff that, fits these criterias for our kids as we speak, and just some stuff that we have found to be good and effective. And, like, maybe if you're a parent with young kids, you'll find these helpful recommendations, or maybe you'll just enjoy watching them on your own, even if you don't have kids right now. So let's go through some recommendations, or, some stuff that we have found we think is forming our kids along the right lines.
Ooh, yeah. I like that question. Do you want to start?
I do want to start.
Okay.
So I will go with, well, first of all, as good Anselm members, I, of course, need to mention the Green Ember and Wing Feather Saga.
There you go.
Both of those are great. The authors of those are both great friends of Anselm. Hello to S.D. Smith and Andrew Peterson.
Hello.
But genuinely, like, those are both really good series. Our kids aren't quite old enough for them yet, but I'm really looking forward to them being old enough to enjoy those. Next one, we just watched one of these the other night, and I just love them to pieces. Wallace and Gromit.
Those are fun.
Yep, so claymation from Aardman's, and there's a few, like, half-hour shows. There's a movie, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which I just love it so friggin' much. It's so good. But it's very charming. It's very quirky. Our kids laughed hysterically at it. And it just, I think, captures something very charming in that sort of claymation animation style that I really love exposing our kids to. Related to that, from the same company, it's sort of in the cinematic universe, I guess, is Shaun the Sheep, which is about a sheep and flock of sheep on this, like, farm in England. And one of the great things about Shaun the Sheep is there's no dialogue. So the kids, to figure out what's going on, they just need to be locked into the screen. And I think that's actually really good because it trains them to pay attention to just the visuals and to keep their focus going. And again, they love them. They think they're hilarious, and they are hilarious. And they're just charming, well-made things that I'm glad that our kids like watching them.
Definitely. I feel like I've already mentioned several that we're really enjoying right now. One that I get asked to read, I say at least once a week, is Miss Rumphius by Barbara Cooney. The boys really do love that one. The illustrations are so beautiful. Let's see. Some movies that came to mind, both from Disney, I think, is Onward.
Okay,
If you want to see me, I mean, a lot of things make me cry, guys. Sorry.
That's been a recurring
That's
theme
been a
of this
recurring theme.
episode.
If you want to see me cry, let's watch Onward together because it's going to happen. Our boys, at first, were a little resistant, I would say, but by the end, really enjoyed it. And it wasn't Noah, but then it was like, Mom, I have brothers. Like, kind of making the connection about, like, I don't know, the specialness of that relationship. Anyway, really fun. Raya and the Last Dragon, if you are looking for something that has some mega major gospel overtones, might I commend Raya and the Last Dragon. We also recently watched, I want to say the new version, but it's just newer than the one that I watched as a child. I think it came out maybe 15 or so years ago now. But Charlotte's Web, my son read that with his kindergarten class, chapter by chapter. So to celebrate all his hard work on reading that story, and they did journaling pages and wrote some sentences for each chapter. We celebrated with a pizza party and watching Charlotte's Web with the whole family. And that's such a lovely story. So whether you read it or watch it, I would encourage that one as well.
All right, that's a good one. And again, very young Matt didn't do well with Charlotte's Web because, spoiler alert, Charlotte dies at the end.
If you don't know by now.
I just couldn't handle it. There are a lot of things I could not handle as a boy. But so I'll start with a sort of classic book that I just especially love, Wind in the Willows. I love it to pieces. We're trying to get our boys interested.
We're hoping to.
It's a little older language, so I think they just need we need to make sure they're locked in for it because I love it so much. I think it's just it's a good way to train the imagination, train the mind to how to interact with the world around you.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. I also really love the Brambley Hedge books.
Oh, man. I just want to crawl inside those illustrations. It's so wonderful.
That's actually what I was going to say. The stories are really good, but the illustrations are fantastic. It's a story about mice who live in like this idyllic, like Victorian pastoral world where they all like live in trees and stuff. And the illustrations
so
are
delightful.
I think there's a lot to be said about having illustrations that you just want to get lost in as a kid. Like some of the Where's Waldo books when I was growing up, I would just stare at those pictures for a very, very long time. And Brambley Hedge is the same way. And I think that's a very good thing.
It's a great one.
My final one. So if you have one final one, keep that locked and loaded. My final one, because I have weirdly strong opinions on this. It's a show on Netflix called Nailed It. So it's kind of in a lot of ways, it seems like a typical like Food Network-y kind of show where it's three people in like this cooking contest. But the spin is the three people who are in this baking contest are not professional chefs. They're not even especially good at baking. They're like normal people who've tried baking a bit and aren't super good at it. And they give them this super complicated like professional cake. It's like in the outline of like the whale in Moby Dick, only it's 3 feet tall and it's a cake. And they give them like 90 minutes to like try to recreate it. And they need to go, and of course they fail, and all the stuff looks really terrible, and that's like where the humor is. So they'll like unveil it, nailed it, and then they show how bad it looks and everyone laughs. I think it's a very valuable show, and it teaches the boys a lot of lessons that I want to impart to them. Sweetie, you may not know this about me, but I can be something of a perfectionist.
Can you?
Yeah.
We're both firstborns.
Yeah, you know.
Maybe we can relate.
So as a perfectionist, I'm given to have this attitude where if I'm not instantly good at something, I'm just going to give up and not try. Nailed It helps train me to view things the opposite way. The contestants each week are 3 people trying their best at something they're bad at. And they try their hardest, but they still fail. And you know what? They're all cool with it. Everyone's in on the joke. Everyone's having fun. No one's making fun of anyone. We're all having a good laugh. We're all having a good time. It's a very good-natured, lighthearted show. Showing everyone it's okay to try something new that you're not good at, and it's okay to fail. I just think that's a great lesson.
I love that. That's what the boys do love it.
They love it.
Today when they were making coloring books for each other. So they, we're making the outline of their drawings and then trading and letting the other person color it in. They even made one for Daddy that was Godzilla versus Jaws. Is that right?
It's a good one. It's on my desk right now.
Anyway, but when they would do a drawing that they decided to discard and not include in the coloring book, they would shout, "Nailed it!" and throw it on the ground. So something is getting through there.
Good.
Yeah, something is getting through there. I don't know that I have anything super momentous to end on, but just kind of in the vein of like books that are just fun and lighthearted and really like naturally enjoyable for kids. You know, it's not just kind of like a stretch and grow sort of book. I really enjoy Mo Willems' books. They're really fun.
I do too.
One of our kids' favorites is The Pigeon Has to Go to School. He has several pigeon books. Then also the Elephant and Piggy books. One of them, Waiting is Not Easy.
I love Waiting is Not Easy.
We read it just earlier today, and it is so funny. It's a really fun read aloud one. Plenty of opportunities to do silly voices. But Waiting Isn't Easy. We actually used that this past year, like during Advent in one of our devotionals with our family. So those books are ones that are so enjoyable, but I'm always surprised by our kids' observations about them. I feel like they consistently start some really interesting conversations, and they're just fun. The illustrations even are very bare bones. Like there's not a ton of detail to them, but they're just very humorous, fun to read out loud together, and we enjoy those a lot.
Absolutely. Hearty seconding to Mo Willems. I think those books are fantastic. All right, so we did it, sweetie. We ran through our childhoods of art.
I know.
Applied those lessons.
I know.
And then used those lessons to give concrete recommendations. So I'd say that's some podcast time well spent.
Do we have it all figured out? Oh my goodness.
Wow.
I can't believe it.
Wow, what a productive hour this has been. But seriously, thank you, sweetie, for joining me on the podcast.
It was fun.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And now, as you all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Customers are trundling home, the fire's down to embers, and you've polished off your final glass. And incidentally, my dog is also getting ready to whine for me to let her out. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. To find out more, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're doing stuff, why not rate and review the show on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Really helps increase the profile of the show, and we really appreciate it. So once again, I'm Matt Mellema. This is Believe to See. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.